Watch this.
You think CTE is a real thing?
No. It's an excuse.
I think asthma's an excuse too.
Yeah.
Is that a hot take?
No, that's a good take.
That's valid.
Yes, asthma's fake.
Is there anything worse than when you're in 4th grade and someone's huffing and puffing, you're just soft?
Yeah, just literally
be better.
Breathe air.
He dismissed CTE and asthma. Here's the thing.
Yeah, he's a grass job. What exercise is that? What exercise is that? All right.
We should have seen this coming. But on the Bring the Juice podcast with Frank Delana, he made these outrageous comments. My question here is why? Do you really want to revisit the CTE conversation?
For Iron Mike, TV interviews became impossible.
No, I'm talking about... No, I'm just trying to find... Yeah, well, trauma, everybody went through trauma as a kid. I'm not saying I was different than that. I'm just saying... the things we do to one another, okay? Hell, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just tired and confused right now. That's why I say I can't really, I can't say it the way I want to say it.
That was Mike Webster, formerly a center for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was the first hard evidence that playing football could cause permanent brain damage, wrote PBS. He would pass away at the age of 50. The Times printed his career was followed by more than a decade of physical and psychological turmoil, apparently brought on by repeated blows to the head on the field. The man who discovered it?
Believing that behavioral changes were caused by trauma to the brain. Determined to find answers, he analyzed Webster's brain and uncovered a new medical condition.
Well, we're looking at region of the brain in a football player, about 40 years old. And what you could see are these brownish spots. You could now see it looks ugly. The most significant contributory factor to CTE is exposure to blunt force trauma of the head. So what happens is that over sometimes up to 40 years, you would now begin to manifest in a progressive manner seemingly innocuous symptoms as mild as constant headaches, very subtle changes in personality, very subtle but diminishing intelligence, and then mood disorders, chronic alcoholism, drug abuse.
Dr. Bennett Omalu, seen here in an interview with ABC. Like Webster, tell the families who have lost loved ones all this stuff, Cam.
Late today, word of a mysterious death, an apparent suicide by a powerful athlete, a force of nature on the football field. NFL great Junior Seau, 43 years old, dead of a gunshot wound to the chest. His mother in shock tonight. And his football colleagues are asking, is this somehow another example of that legacy of the punishment players take on the field?
Her husband, Ralph Wenzel, had played for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
As the disease progressed, he went from being ill but fairly functional to getting to the point where he could no longer, dress or feed himself. And in the last year and a half to 2 years before he died, he couldn't even walk anymore.
The football world has been rocked this week by the sad death of a former star. The Super Bowl winning safety Dave Durson took his own life, convinced that the despair he faced was caused in part by the damage he suffered on the football field.
Kansas City, where the linebacker Jovan Belcher was supposed to be taking the field today for the Chiefs. That is not going to happen, however. Police say Belcher killed his girlfriend on Saturday and then killed himself in front of his coach.
Dr. Ann McKee of Boston University would put her skills to the test and publish this groundbreaking report in 2017. She examined the brains of 202 athletes, with 111 of them playing in the National Football League. Of those 111, 110 were found to have CTE.
And just days before Super Bowl 57, an all-new study is highlighting the serious health risk many football players face while playing on the field. Researchers at the Boston University CTE Center analyzed the brains of 376 former NFL players. They found 92% of them had CTE.
McKee would then speak with BU's media team.
Can you take me back to the day that you looked at the first brain of a football player where you saw signs of CTE.
I had looked at boxers' brains and I'd been really floored to see the changes. And then when I looked at the first football player, I knew he was 45 years old. When I looked at his brain grossly, when we looked at it with the naked eye, it looked fine. Finally, we got the slides back on this 45-year-old, and he had extraordinary disease. I mean, it was florid disease, tau everywhere, and that just blew me away. This is a 65-year-old.
It's really remarkable
yeah,
how much.
And you start to see it spreads, it involves more and more regions of brain. It just starts encompassing vast regions. In most individuals, it will progress, and the longer they live, the worse their disease will get, not only pathologically, but their symptoms will get worse.
Here's the thing. It's not just the elder statesman.
I read a stat that said a 2023 study found that more than 40% of brains from contact sport players who died before age 30 had CTE, which came out of Boston University.
Yeah, that was our study last August. And in that study, we studied 152 athletes, and we found like 63% had signs of CTE, early CTE, so about 41% had CTE. That is shocking news. That is saying to me, we have to address this disease. These are kids. They had no reason for their lives to end so early. So we have to address this.
The issue with Cam is that this line of thinking is ingrained in the culture of football.
Concussions, I think, is one of these packed journalism issues, frankly. There's no increase in concussions. The number is relatively small. The problem is it's a journalist issue.
This is the commissioner of the NFL saying that there's no concussion issue.
From former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue to the current one, Roger Goodell. The NFL, per McKee, refuses to work with her and has not made contact with her in years. It feels grossly intentional for a league that claims to be prioritizing players' safety, which we all know is a flat-out lie.
I think we've proven that, Charlie. I think the game is better and safer than it ever is.
It's also reflective with how they treated Dr. Bennett Omalu.
Omalu's published findings were dismissed, even demonized by fans and some in the NFL.
What were some of the things people called you back then?
That some insinuated I was a voodoo doctor, that I was fraudulent, that I was synthesizing my data and my findings. Some pretty much called me the N-word. I actually lost my job.
Because Goodell and the NFL mistreated him too. At a concussion summit in 2007, the league would invite prominent scientists who had been fighting the shield on concussions. They presented their work, but here's the thing. Dr. Omalu was not allowed in the room. Dr. McKee would also receive similar treatment.
I'm just going to show them what I have. And they kept interrupting. They kept interrupting and saying, well, there, see, you don't have, they had a lot of preconceptions about what they thought trauma did to the brain. And in fact, one of the comments was, you have no evidence of any trauma. You've shown us this tau, but there's no trauma. And actually, then I did show them that on the brain of Wally Hilgenberg, there were traumatic lesions. There were what we call contusions. They're indisputable evidence of trauma. And then they would say, and then one of their biggest problems was that pathology that you showed is not anywhere where we would expect to see the effects of trauma. So it can't be related to football. And it was like, just because you have these preconceptions about what trauma does to the brain, this is what the brains show.
What Cam speaks to a large extent, is the climate that we are currently in.
There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there has always been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread, winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. This quote is from 1980, and it's been echoed by other great thinkers like Carl Sagan, who spoke about the public being unable to grasp the technology we all use every day and having no ability to set their own agenda or ask the right questions, culminating in a celebration of ignorance. He said that in 1995. This anti-science fervor makes us easy to manipulate because any contrarian message is bought en masse, no matter who is telling it or what their motives are.
The renaissance of anti-intellectualism. And on that topic, Nadia Garriga of the Fordham Political Review would print, according to the data, an estimated 2/3 of young adults between the ages of 16 to 18 struggle with basic literacy. And about 57% of 19 to 24-year-olds fall below the standard. While these stats are concerning, this trend continues to represent a larger cultural shift, one that presents a deeper problem with intellectualism in America. Let me just add, what Cam has not only represented but will continue to represent is a guy that, like the UFC, the NFL loves. This person is not a threat. He is saying long-term effects are a hoax. They don't exist. And did you know that the NFL, when they settled the concussion lawsuit, they did not admit any wrongdoing? That is astounding. Astounding. By putting up this mockery of pretending to care about the players, that they will not link football to brain damage. On that topic, and a subset, another troubling trend, the amount of football players with ALS. And we are seeing this grow year by year by year with more names to add to the list. My question for the Giants star running back is this. You put out an apology afterwards. Fine. He also did the non-apology apology of, if I offended anyone, I'm sorry, which falls way short and also shows you're not very sorry. You probably got a call from the league office. What will it take for you to not think like this anymore? We have a history, a plethora of former players whose brains have been examined. Unfortunately, with where we are right now in the United States of America, this sort of stuff is not only allowed and enabled, not from a free speech perspective, but from a community that goes against science, that goes against doctors. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an anti-vaxxer, even though he will never admit it, has made his way as HHS secretary. We are in scary times, and it would not be lost on me if some of those who really benefited from going against doctors, going against science, all of this really having a resurgence post-COVID and, quite frankly, republicanism, if they were to anoint Cam Skattebo and rather raise him up to a level that he has never seen before because of these comments.